My love story seemed perfect, full of love, promises, and dreams of a beautiful future. But I had no idea that my fiancé was only using her as a pawn in his game. One day, she uncovered a truth that shattered her world. Jack wasn't just lying to her, he was betraying her in ways she never imagined. He wasn't just pretending to love her, he had been taking advantage of her trust, taking out loans in her name and secretly seeing other women. But Sarah wasn't the type to suffer in silence, she was the type to take revenge. She gathered undeniable proof of his lies and deceit and exposed him in front of his friends, family, and even the media. Jack lost everything, his reputation, his relationships, and his carefully built facade. In the end, Sarah made sure he paid for every single lie he ever told her. My name is Sarah, and my life changed on a quiet spring evening. I had just graduated in industrial engineering with honors, excited for a bright future. My hard work earned me respect from professors, friends, and colleagues at my internship. Everything seemed perfect, until it all went wrong. Among all these relationships, there was one that seemed like the perfect foundation, my fiancé, Jack. He was everything I had ever wanted in a partner. Ambitious, charming, and supportive. We had built our lives together, sharing everything from academic successes to our plans for the future. I never once doubted his loyalty or his love for me. My best friend Emma had always warned me to be cautious, but I brushed off her concerns. After all, who could question the man who had been by my side for so long? As the days passed, I began noticing small inconsistencies. Jack was always a little too busy when it came to my projects, his excuses increasingly hollow. And then there was the strange tension between him and Emma, though I could never quite figure out why. I tried to ignore it, focused on my upcoming promotion and the culmination of everything I had worked for. But then, a single email, one that was accidentally forwarded to me, changed everything. It revealed Jack's betrayal in the most devastating way. He had been stealing my designs, submitting them as his own to secure a major contract for his career. He was not only cheating on me emotionally with Emma, but had been actively sabotaging my career to rise above me. I felt like the ground had been ripped from under me. The pain was suffocating, and the rage was blinding. But in that moment of despair, something inside me shifted. I couldn't just let this slide. I couldn't let them get away with destroying everything I had worked for. What followed wasn't just a fight for revenge. It was the beginning of a new dangerous game. One that would cost Jack everything in ways he never imagined. The revenge would not be swift, nor would it be obvious. But it would be calculated, and it would leave scars far deeper than anything he had ever done to me. As I look back on the days before everything came crashing down, I remember a time when my life felt secure. When love and friendship seemed like constants in an ever-changing world. Jack, my fiancé, was my rock. We met in college, and from the very first day we spoke, it felt like destiny. His infectious smile and warm demeanor made him the kind of person everyone gravitated toward, but he made me feel like I was the only one in the room. We spent years building a future together. Late-night talks about our dreams, planning our wedding, and imagining our life after graduation. His support was unwavering. Every time I faced a challenge, he was there lifting me up, telling me I was capable of achieving anything. And I believed him. Emma, my best friend since childhood, was another pillar in my life. We had shared everything, our secrets, our fears, our triumphs. She was always the one who pushed me to go after my dreams, even when I doubted myself. She had this uncanny ability to see the good in people, to encourage me when I felt uncertain. She had always been by my side, and I trusted her completely. We had even talked about how perfect Jack seemed for me, how he was everything I needed in a partner. Emma never once gave me a reason to doubt her or her loyalty, and I never imagined that there could be any cracks in the bond we shared. My family, too, was an anchor in my life. My parents had always encouraged my independence and supported my ambitions. They were proud of my academic achievements and excited about the future Jack and I were building. I could feel their pride in the way they spoke about us, how they looked forward to the day we would get married and start a family of our own. The foundation they had built for me had made me believe that anything was possible. I remember one evening, not long before everything unraveled, we all had dinner at my parents' house. Jack, Emma, and I laughed over dinner, sharing stories about our college days. It felt like the perfect moment, my two closest people, both of whom I trusted with my heart, by my side. Little did I know that just behind the laughter and the smiles, betrayal was brewing. The very people who I thought had my best interests at heart were quietly setting the stage for my heartbreak. It was in these moments of happiness, when trust and love felt unshakable, that the betrayal would hit hardest. The rug would be pulled out from under me when I least expected it, and the people who meant the most would become the ones who hurt me the deepest. The betrayal didn't come in a loud, dramatic outburst. It came quietly, like a whisper in the dark. But the moment I discovered it, it shattered me beyond repair. It all started with a simple mistake. A misdirected email that ended up in my inbox instead of Jack's. I'd been working late on my final design presentation, preparing for a major opportunity that would launch my career. My phone buzzed, and at first, I didn't think much of it. But as I opened the email, my heart stopped. It was a chain of messages between Jack and one of his colleagues. My eyes scanned the words, disbelief creeping over me with every sentence. They were discussing the patent submission for a project I had spent months working on, the same project I had proudly shared with Jack just days before. But there it was, in black and white. Jack had not only taken my work, but had submitted it as his own, bypassing me completely. He'd made sure I didn't even know the contract had been awarded, and he was now positioned to receive the credit and financial gain for something that was never his idea in the first place. The words on the screen blurred as my hands began to shake. My mind raced, and a wave of nausea washed over me. I immediately reached out to Jack, my heart pounding in my chest, but there was no answer. My world spun as I tried to process what I had just uncovered. I knew, deep down, that something had been off for weeks, but I never expected this. My mind went back to the late-night work sessions, the subtle excuses he made about his other commitments, and the moments when he grew distant, his affection for me waning as his success seemed to flourish. Was I just a fool, blind to the person I thought I knew? When Jack finally returned my call, his voice was calm, too calm. He didn't apologize, didn't seem to feel the weight of the betrayal. Instead, he tried to justify it. "Sarah, it's just business," he said, as if that made everything okay. "I didn't want to hurt you, but I had to take advantage of the opportunity. You know how competitive this field is." The words stung like a slap across my face. How could he say that so casually, after all we had built together? How could he look me in the eyes for all these years and pretend to support me, only to steal from me when I was vulnerable? And then there was Emma, the one person I thought I could always count on. She had known about the betrayal, had even encouraged Jack to move forward with it. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Emma, my best friend, the person who had always been my confidant, had been complicit in this entire deception. I couldn't comprehend it. How had she become someone so cold, so self-serving? She and Jack had betrayed me not just professionally, but personally, destroying the trust I had placed in both of them. The pain was unbearable, and as the tears fell, I felt an overwhelming sense of loss. Not just for the trust that had been shattered, but for the life I thought I was building with them. I was left questioning everything: my relationship with Jack, my friendship with Emma, and my place in a world where the people I loved most were the ones who had torn me apart. It wasn't just the theft of my work that hurt. It was the betrayal of my heart, the crushing weight of realizing that the people I trusted most had never really cared about me at all. The days that followed the betrayal were a blur of confusion, anger, and a deep, suffocating ache. I couldn't bring myself to leave the apartment we had shared for so long. The place that once felt like home now seemed like a prison, each corner echoing with the remnants of the life I thought I had. My hands shook as I stared at the empty space beside me where Jack used to be. His absence wasn't just physical. It was a hole in my heart that nothing seemed to fill. I could feel the anger bubbling inside me, a hot, burning fury that seemed to rise with each passing hour. How dare he betray me like this? How could I have been so blind? I was angry at him, furious even, but I was just as angry at myself. Why hadn't I seen it coming? Why hadn't I listened to Emma when she'd cautioned me, when she'd told me to be careful? She had been right all along, and yet I had refused to believe that the people closest to me could hurt me like this. I was lost, my identity shattered. I had always defined myself by my ambitions, by the relationships I had built, and now I wasn't sure who I was anymore. The loneliness was suffocating. I couldn't bring myself to talk to anyone about what had happened. I avoided calls from friends, ignored messages from colleagues. Everyone thought I was fine. After all, I had always been strong, driven, and independent. But now, I was a hollow shell of the person I used to be. It was as if the betrayal had stolen not just my trust, but my ability to move forward, to even consider a future. And yet, amidst the storm of emotions, there was a quiet voice deep within me that refused to let it end this way. As much as the pain stung, as much as I wanted to scream and cry and rage against what had happened, there was something stronger within me. A thirst for justice. A burning desire to make them pay for what they had done. The idea of forgiveness felt impossible. How could I forgive Jack for stealing my work, my dreams? How could I ever look at Emma the same way again after she had so casually stood by and watched me suffer? One evening, as I sat on the couch, lost in my thoughts, my phone buzzed. It was a message from my older brother, Matt. He had been my protector growing up, always looking out for me, even when I didn't want it. We hadn't spoken much since I'd moved in with Jack, but the message was simple. You need to talk. I'm coming over. When he arrived, he found me in a state of disarray. Clothes scattered around the room, my eyes red from crying. The moment he saw me, his expression hardened with concern, but he didn't push me. He simply sat down beside me, offering silent comfort. After a long pause, he finally spoke. You don't have to forgive them, Sarah. Not yet. What they did was wrong, but what you do next, how you handle this, will define you. His words cut through the fog of anger clouding my mind. I had spent so much time fixated on how they had wronged me, but Matt was right. What mattered now was what I was going to do about it. Would I let them win? Would I shrink back and let Jack and Emma walk away unscathed, their betrayal unpunished? Or would I fight for everything I had lost? He paused before adding, I know you're hurt, and I know you want revenge, but you don't have to destroy yourself to get it. Take your time. Think about what you want your life to look like from here on out. I looked at Matt, his unwavering support reminding me that I wasn't alone. He was right. I had been so consumed by the need for retribution that I hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. Revenge wasn't just about inflicting pain. It was about reclaiming my power, about showing the world that I wouldn't let my past define me. That night, I made a decision. I wouldn't just let this betrayal fade into my past. I would make them pay, but on my terms. I would rebuild myself, stronger, more determined, and yes, vengeful. But I wouldn't let the darkness consume me. I would rise above it all, stronger than ever, and ready to take on whatever came next. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but it would be mine to control. And Jack and Emma, they had no idea what they had just unleashed. The first few days after I made the decision to seek revenge were consumed by an overwhelming sense of purpose. The anger that had once consumed me began to settle into something sharper, more calculated. I was no longer the heartbroken woman who had been blindsided. I was someone with a goal, and that goal was justice, retribution for the betrayal that had nearly broken me. But getting justice wasn't going to be simple. It wasn't enough to confront Jack and Emma head-on. I needed a plan, a way to make them feel the consequences of their actions in ways they couldn't ignore, ways that would resonate deeply in their professional and personal lives. I began by focusing on Jack. He thought he had won. He thought he had secured the project, the recognition, and the financial gain without lifting a finger. But what he hadn't counted on was me. He didn't realize that his success had been built on the back of my work. It was time for that to be exposed. I knew I had to strike where it would hurt him the most: his reputation. I started by gathering every piece of evidence I could find: the emails, the contracts, the recordings of our meetings where he had lied, each document meticulously stored on my computer. But that wasn't enough. Jack had connections, powerful allies who would back him up, dismissing my accusations as jealousy or a woman scorned. I needed something undeniable, something that would force the people who supported him to rethink their loyalty. It took weeks of subtle digging, contacting people from his past who had worked with him before, piecing together a hidden history of deceit and betrayal. I found whispers of past projects where Jack had taken credit for others' work, using his charm and manipulation to get ahead. But I didn't stop there. I knew Jack's ego better than anyone. I needed to hit him where it would hurt the most: his pride. I set up a meeting with a potential client, someone Jack had been courting for months. With a well-placed comment here and a strategically shared document there, I made sure to highlight the true origins of the project he'd stolen. The client was intrigued but skeptical, asking questions that made Jack squirm. It was a small crack in his armor, but it was the beginning of a much larger storm. As for Emma, her betrayal stung just as deeply, but I knew that taking her down required a different approach. She was a master manipulator, always the one to stay in the shadows, never taking the spotlight for herself, but always pulling the strings behind the scenes. It wasn't just that she had stood by Jack's side. It was that she had played the role of my confidant, pretending to be my friend while watching everything I worked for crumble. She had always been the person who helped me through tough times, but now I saw her true nature: calculating, opportunistic, and ruthlessly ambitious. She had encouraged Jack to make the move, to take what wasn't his, knowing full well how much it would hurt me. I knew Emma had her own vulnerabilities. She thrived on her image, on being the one everyone turned to for guidance. What I needed to do was expose the truth about her, show the world the lengths she was willing to go to for her own gain. I began contacting people from her past, those who had worked with her in previous companies, quietly asking questions about her conduct, her manipulations. I made sure to gather evidence that linked her to other questionable actions, but Emma was clever. She always covered her tracks, always made sure her involvement was subtle enough to go unnoticed. The challenge was to expose her in a way that wouldn't just destroy her career. It would strip her of the trust she had built with everyone around her. Every step of this plan was dangerous. Jack was becoming more suspicious, and Emma, ever the strategist, was likely aware that something wasn't right. I had to tread carefully, making sure not to reveal my hand too soon. Each move had to be executed flawlessly, or it could all fall apart. The pressure weighed heavily on me. But the more I thought about what they had done, the more I realized there was no going back. I couldn't just let them get away with this. The plan was taking shape, and while it wasn't easy, I knew that once it was set in motion, nothing would be able to stop it. The clock was ticking. I had to act quickly before either of them could anticipate my next move. And as I sat back, reviewing my strategy once more, I couldn't help but feel a spark of satisfaction. They had underestimated me, but soon they would understand the cost of crossing me. The first move in my plan was simple but crucial: the email. It was carefully crafted, each word chosen with precision. I attached the documents that exposed Jack's fraudulent claims to the client, along with a timeline that detailed how he had misrepresented his involvement in the project. It was a subtle strike, not enough to immediately end his career, but enough to cause doubt in the minds of those who mattered most. I clicked send, and the wait began. I knew Jack would try to spin things, but it was too late. The seeds had been planted. The next phase was Emma. I'd set the trap carefully, gathering evidence of her manipulations and connecting the dots to show her role in the betrayal. I had arranged a private meeting with a journalist, someone who had the reputation for digging deep and exposing corruption. She was interested, but she needed proof. So I handed her everything: the conversations, the meetings, the emails, laying it all out in front of her. The truth was undeniable, but the real question was whether Emma would realize what was happening before it was too late. As I sat in my apartment, watching her social media updates and checking for any sign of panic, I knew that she had no idea what was coming. She was too focused on her own success to notice the storm gathering around her. But as I pushed forward, the pressure mounted. Jack began to suspect something was wrong. He confronted me one afternoon, his eyes filled with suspicion. "You've been quiet lately," he said, his voice low. "What are you up to, Rachel?" I maintained my composure, smiling through the tension. "Nothing, Jack," I replied, just focusing on the work as always. But inside, my heart was pounding. I had to keep him from discovering the truth too soon. If he knew, everything could unravel in an instant. The day I received a call from the journalist was the moment I knew I was getting close to the end. The article exposing Emma's web of lies would be published in 48 hours. I couldn't help but feel a rush of triumph as I read through the draft she'd sent me. Emma's betrayal was about to be laid bare for the world to see. But at the same time, a wave of doubt crept over me. Was this really what I wanted? Had I gone too far? The faces of the people I cared about, the ones who had been blindsided by Emma's lies, flashed in my mind. I had done what needed to be done, but the cost was starting to feel heavier than I had anticipated. As the article went live, I could already see the ripples of its impact. Emma's phone began to buzz incessantly, her public image crumbling as the truth spread like wildfire. I didn't know how long it would take for her to fully realize the extent of her fall, but I knew it would be devastating. She would be forced to face the consequences of her betrayal, and Jack, too, was beginning to feel the pressure. The client had pulled the contract, and the whispers about his past misdeeds had started to spread within the company. I felt a sense of satisfaction in knowing that their empire of lies was crumbling. But in the quiet moments, as I watched their worlds unravel, the weight of my actions began to sink in. I had won, yes. But at what cost? As much as I had outsmarted them, the emotional toll of revenge was not something I had anticipated. Would I ever be able to move on from this? The answers weren't clear yet, but one thing was certain. I had taken back control of my life. And for the first time in months, I could breathe again. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. It was late one evening when Jack showed up at my apartment, his face a mask of anger and confusion. The veneer of control he'd so carefully constructed had shattered in the wake of my actions. He had figured it out. He knew that I had been behind the leaks, the article, the downfall of everything he had worked for. The arrogance that once defined him was gone, replaced by panic and desperation. "Rachel," he spat, his voice low and dangerous. "You've gone too far." I didn't flinch, though the weight of his words threatened to crush me. I had prepared for this moment, but nothing could have prepared me for the intensity in his eyes. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about power, control, and the brutal finality of what I had done. He took a step closer, his voice rising. "You think this will make you feel better? You think you can just destroy everything I've worked for and walk away unscathed? You've made a mistake." I could feel my heart pounding in my chest, the adrenaline rushing through me, but there was no fear. Only a calm, cold certainty. "No, Jack, I'm not the one who made a mistake," I said, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. "You and Emma destroyed everything I had, my trust, my future, my belief in the people I thought I knew. This is the cost of your betrayal." Jack's expression faltered for a moment, something like guilt flashing across his features, before he quickly masked it. "It was never about you, Rachel. I needed to survive. I did what I had to do." The word struck me like a slap. Survive? All these years, I had believed we were partners, working toward the same goals. And yet, in his mind, I had never mattered at all. I had simply been a tool, a stepping stone in his path to success. The realization hit hard, but it also solidified my resolve. I took a deep breath, my eyes locking with his. "You could have been honest, Jack. You could have chosen a different path. But you chose betrayal. And now you'll have to live with it." He scoffed, backing away. "You really think you've won? You've destroyed my career, but you've ruined yourself too. What's next, Rachel? Are you going to destroy Emma too?" At the mention of Emma's name, a surge of anger flared within me. I had already dealt with her in my own way. But Jack was right. Emma had been as complicit as he had been. Her betrayal was a different kind of cruelty, one that cut deeper because she had pretended to be my friend. But as I thought about the damage I had done, I hesitated. I had seen Jack at his lowest, and I knew what this confrontation was costing him. For a brief moment, I wondered if I had gone too far. Was there any part of me left that still cared about him, or was I too consumed by the need for revenge to ever be free of this toxic cycle? Jack took another step back, still caught up in his own fury. "You've won, Rachel. You've taken everything from me, but you're no better than me." The words stung, but I didn't react. He was right, in a way. I had become so focused on my revenge that I had lost sight of who I was before all of this. I had sacrificed so much to bring him down, my peace of mind, my sense of self. Was it worth it? Could I live with the consequences of everything I'd done? The room felt suffocating as the tension between us hung in the air. My mind raced, weighing the decision in front of me. I could destroy Jack completely, expose everything, make sure he had nothing left. Or I could let him face the consequences of his own choices, knowing that he would never be the same again. For a long moment, I didn't speak, the weight of the decision pressing down on me. Finally, I took a deep breath and said, "I'm done, Jack. I've taken everything I need from you. I don't need to destroy you further." The silence that followed was deafening. Jack's face twisted with frustration, but he didn't argue. Instead, he turned and walked away, the door closing softly behind him. I was left standing in the stillness, my heart heavy with the aftermath of everything that had transpired. In that moment, I realized something crucial. I had taken control of my life again. Revenge had cost me, but it had also freed me. I had made Jack and Emma pay for their betrayals, but now I was free to move forward, to reclaim the future I had almost lost. The aftermath of everything that had happened was both quieter and heavier than I had imagined. In the days that followed the confrontation, I found myself grappling with a mixture of emotions: satisfaction, relief, guilt, and a strange sense of emptiness. The revenge I had sought so fiercely had been executed flawlessly, yet it didn't fill the hole that had existed inside me for so long. What had I really gained? I had watched Jack's empire crumble, seen Emma's career unravel, but none of it brought me the peace I had hoped for. As I sat alone in my apartment, the silence surrounding me felt different. It was no longer oppressive, but rather a space for reflection. I had won the battle, but the war within me was far from over. Revenge had tasted bittersweet. It had freed me from their grip, but it had also forced me to confront the parts of myself I had been avoiding, the part that had let myself be deceived for so long, the part that had allowed my own identity to be shaped by their manipulation. In the weeks that followed, I realized that the true victory wasn't in the destruction of those who had wronged me. It was in my own transformation. I began to rebuild my life, not around the remnants of my past, but by forging a future that was entirely mine. I enrolled in a new project at work, one that would challenge me in ways I hadn't allowed myself to be challenged before. I took up hobbies I had abandoned, rekindling a sense of joy that had been buried beneath the weight of my past. The lessons I learned weren't just about revenge or betrayal. They were about the strength that lies within us to reclaim our power, to recognize when we're at a crossroads and choose a path that allows us to grow. Revenge had been a catalyst, yes, but it was my resilience, my ability to rise above the pain, that had truly defined me. I no longer defined myself by the betrayals of others, but by the courage I had found within myself to move forward. In conversations with my friends and family, I found myself more at peace. I had never told them the full extent of what had happened, but in small ways, they saw the change in me. I was no longer the woman who had been manipulated, the woman who had been deceived. I was someone different. Someone who had taken control, someone who had learned to stand up for herself. My relationships deepened, and for the first time in a long while, I felt secure in my place in the world. There was no grand moment of forgiveness, no magical reconciliation. What I had done to Jack and Emma was irreversible, and in some ways I had made my peace with that. But as time went on, I understood that true justice wasn't about exacting punishment. It was about letting go of the past, freeing myself from the chains they had placed on me, and choosing to live a life that was authentically mine. I had given them what they deserved, but in the end, I had given myself something even more precious, my own freedom. And as I looked out at the city skyline from my window one evening, the weight of my past finally seemed to lift. I had not only survived their betrayal, I had thrived because of it. The journey had been long and painful, but in the end, I realized that it wasn't revenge that had changed me. It was my ability to move forward, to reinvent myself, and to choose a future where I was in control. And that, I realized, was the true power.